Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and this is going to be a brief little review of DC Comics' New 52 trade, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Volume 1, Redemption. Written by Scott Lobdell, with an assist in Part 1 by Josh Williamson, art by Kenneth Rocafort and Blonde, and lettering by Manuel Brosseau and Cienti, respectively. This volume collects issues 1 through 7 of the New 52 title, and very interestingly doesn't begin with issue number 1, as you might expect. Rather does the volume open with issue number 6, which is, for all intents and purposes, the better way to have gone, to keep up the momentum and flow of the story and keep it much more fluid. I say this because issue number 6, when kept in its place in succession of issues 1 through 7, is more akin to a flashback that no one in particular is having, whereas beginning with it allows us to see just how Jason Todd, aka Red Hood, and Princess Koriand'r of Tamaran, aka Starfire, first met. In fact, she saved his life. Shortly after stopping a hulking submarine from sneaking into Miami, a horde of nuclear weapons, the vessel exploded, nearly doing Red Hood in. But Kori found and rescued him, bringing his unconscious body to her small island getaway, where her ship ultimately had crashed some time earlier. And she'd since been hiding out, as apparently her experiences with humans hadn't done well to assure her of her own safety, or so we're led to gather from her words. Issue 6 is also a fitting debut, as largely retreated to memories Jason has of his being former Batman sidekick Robin for a time. Most notably does he recall having a particular disdain for Dick Grayson, the first former Robin turned Nightwing, and Batman after the Joker had beaten him to death and he was subsequently resurrected. There's an interesting contrast between these revealing memories and the stunted one Kori seems to have. It's unclear as to whether it's a type of amnesia, whether selective or based on the way her people process stimuli and personal experiences, but whatever the case, within her ship she carries spare apparels she offers up to Jason for wearing, one of which is Nightwing's suit, which is what reveals Jason's distaste for him. It seems this Kori has somewhat of a similar history with the Teen Titans as her pre-New 52 counterpart did, though how much of that is unclear. But she doesn't seem to remember it because she's either incapable, the way her mind works, or unwilling to, for an as-yet unseen reason. The romance with Dick is still seemingly a thing, though, and this sets Jason ill at ease for a little while and forces him to come clean about his relationships with Bruce and Dick, respectively. You might say a bond of sorts is formed between he and Kori then and there. They share an intimacy that is, or should be, deep and profound, if it weren't for Kori's personal trappings of not seeing this kind of interpersonal relationship quite in that way. But she willingly plays backup to him when he stumbles across a news item that fellow former Titan and friend Roy Harper, aka Arsenal, is about to be executed in the Middle Eastern country of Iraq. They too swoop in to rescue Roy, rather cleverly I thought, as Jason's Red Hood wears a bogus bodysuit of an overweight pastor, coming to give Roy his last rites, only to explode out of it after having passed Roy his bow, which was snugly hidden inside a carved-out Bible. They make off via jeep, and not too long after roll right into the path of the severely accurate cannons of several tanks, looking to stop their escape. Enter Starfire, who dispatches them with relative ease to Roy's wide-eyed delight. There's a bit of a downtime to follow before the next big doings for Red Hood and his team, wherein he's visited by the non-corporeal essence of, well, essence, as it were, a woman decked out all in black, which is accented by the shock of white braided hair at her crown. She comes requesting Jason's help in the stopping of an ancient evil reawakened in the form of a group called the Untitled, which Jason reluctantly agrees to, and which subsequently leads him back to his old stomping grounds not long after his resurrection by Lazarus Pit at the hands of Talia al Ghul, known as the 100 Acres of All, home of the All Caste. The All Caste is seemingly an ages-old sect brought together by the intermingling of ancient good and evil and cast apart from said evil to defy it and put a stop to it whenever it should rear its ugly head. Through the teachings of the all-caste leader, the visibly elderly Dukra, Jason is taught a lot about fighting, much more than he's ever learned in Gotham at the hands of Bruce Wayne. Here he is taught with the purpose of being ready to one day cease the activities of the Untitled once and for all. This shown to us largely in flashback, as the all-caste as it stands now has nearly been entirely wiped out by that very enemy. Jason, Kori, and Roy need to fend off the now zombified all-caste, all the while trying to reach the heart of their hidden acreage in order to find out what was left behind by that Untitled. This leads to perhaps the most intriguing, revealing, and even touching aspect of the volume, when the trio meet the cherub-like Saru the Proctor, a several millennia-old barter of memories. In order for the trio to enter the centermost recesses of the all-caste's hidden underground, they must first give up, albeit temporarily, their most precious of memories. Each of the three do do so somewhat reluctantly, but with Saru's promise not to peek into the glowing orbs that represent these memories, they move forward. And as they walk headlong into battle with a giant ugly creature that tries to eat them alive, Saru gives in to temptation and peeks anyway. We're given insights into Starfire's having once been a child slave, sold to a warring alien culture by her own sister, in the alleged promise of keeping peace between their two worlds, as well as the fact that Kori doesn't suffer fools gladly, brutally killing one of the more sympathetic aliens, as treating her in such a way is even more demeaning to her than being forced to wear her chains. We're given a particularly intriguing insight into Roy's past, as it is the noted supervillain killer Croc, who realizes Roy's fight with him is inspired with the hope that Croc will end his life, this being a moment of true desperation for Roy after losing everything he once had, and not knowing how to even begin rebounding. Croc actually defies Roy's hope and sets him on the path to enlightenment, so to speak, which is surprising. And finally, the touching revelation that Jason, during the time he donned the mask and cape as Robin, was too sick one night to go out on a nighttime prowl with the Dark Knight. Alfred insisted he stay behind at the manor, and when Bruce sees he is truly sick, he agrees. You think at first, the way the scene plays out, that Jason's most cherished memory involves spending some grandfatherly time with Alfred in Bruce's absence, but instead it is revealed that Bruce himself takes that particular night off as well, and Jason falls asleep beside him as they watch movies together. Jumping back to the present, Starfire nukes the giant creature that has now swallowed her from the inside, bringing an end to their battle, and Jason ultimately finds what the Untitled left behind. As the trio go to leave, Kori and Roy take back their memories willingly, but curiously, Jason tells Saru to keep his, and he never looks back. In the wake of this, Red Hood and the Outlaws are officially a team, and they're led to Colorado on the heels of the Untitled, who's been holed up there for a couple decades in disguise. Jason largely takes the creature on by himself once it's uncovered who it is, as Kori is attacked by a mutated human with a grudge against Tamaranians, and Roy has to help her fend off its attacks. The subsequent battles, however, revealed to Jason a hidden truth, that someone he once considered a friend was in fact the true instigator of the attack of his fellow Allcast, and that betrayal comes to a head as the volume comes to a close. Red Hood and the Outlaws Volume 1 is definitely an intriguing piece. The overall story features multiple layers, supportive reveals, and a couple of neat twists and turns that aren't expected. There are aspects of it that may leave you shrugging on the first read-through if you're not really paying attention, but you're ultimately left feeling like you got 2 volumes worth of a story in one, if that makes sense. The action elements stoke the pacing of the unfolding saga and are dynamic and fluid in how they play out. The art, in a word, is spectacular. The volume is simply gorgeous. From highly detailed multi-level vistas to brutal fights and emphatic close-ups, there does not exist even one dull page. Now, going into this book for the first time, having bought only the first issue back when it originally came out, I remember there being a lot of ruckus raised over the visual design of Starfire, and in particular a beachhead reveal of her curvature that spoke to a growing unease in some fans of DC's seeming over-sexualizing the female cast of characters. This too being seemingly compounded by the lack of any real attachment shown by Kori in her intimate relationships with both Jason and Roy in this volume. If I were to summarize my overall reaction to this after reading this volume, I'd have to say it's largely intriguing in that she is an alien and by all accounts different than we are. And the feeling I'm left with is that these aspects may be further explored in a later volume. Yes, Starfire is depicted not altogether fairly when compared to real-world women, and this may be further compounded by the fact that a villainess who appears within the volume is shown to be grotesquely overweight and unappealing looking by comparison. However, with the exception of the issue 1 display of sexuality as shown by Kori, it is largely a non-issue throughout the rest of it, and even that scene pays off later on as having allowed her attacker to find her. There is a level of feeling like DC Comics doesn't get it by the end. You can see, when you add up every account, that in some way they cannot see past themselves, the bottom line, or the predominantly male consumers that largely purchase their wares. And it's a shame, to be honest. I remember the Teen Titans cartoon having no such divide between male and female viewers, and frankly it is disturbing, as the female readers are just as valuable, and sometimes just as in need of a character who can serve as a role model for them. Still, with all of that being said, the potential for DC's being somewhat sexist in their portrayals of women heroes and such notwithstanding, the volume is a multi-tiered, enjoyable read, and it leaves you curious to see where Red Hood and his team will go next. I'll be rating Red Hood and the Outlaws Volume 1 Redemption a 3 out of 5, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below as to whether you've read or plan to read Volume 1 Redemption, what your overall thoughts on it were, if you have. And otherwise, that'll be it for me on this one. I hope you're all doing well, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you later. Peace.